Welcome back to the final video of the CSS Grid course. Now this course is actually a subset of my full stack roadmap series, which takes you from complete beginner, first lines of code written, to deploying a full stack React.js e-commerce application. If that sounds interesting to you, check out this video up here. It's the introduction. There's also links in the description to the playlist that will also give you kind of the order that you can watch this CSS Grid tutorial in. Over the next hour or two, we'll see how long it takes us, we're going to be attempting to build what you see on my screen here. I don't know the full origin story of how this name came about, but if you go down the rabbit hole of Wikipedia and click the Holy Grail, it says the term is often used to denote an elusive object or goal that is sought after for its great significance. And that describes this layout very well, because before Flexbox in CSS Grid, achieving this layout was very difficult, and there was a lot of CSS hacks that we had to use, including clear fixes and floats and stuff like that, and fixed positioning and absolute positioning. All of that stuff was a thing of the past, but now that we have Flexbox in CSS Grid, this becomes a lot easier. So before we jump in, let's talk about a few of the goals that I have for you in this tutorial. We're going to split this up into a few parts. It'll all be part of the same exact video, but you're not going to have to go through everything if you don't want to. You can kind of skip through things that you're already comfortable with. So the first thing we've got to do is get our coding environment set up. So in this full stack roadmap series, we have briefly used Visual Studio Code, but mostly been working in CodePen, and I want to get you set up with a few extensions and things that will make your life a little bit easier. After that, we're going to set up a basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript boilerplate, and that just means we're going to make our HTML document and then connect up all the pieces so that they are working together. We'll add in a few external style sheets, including some Google fonts and some icons, so Font Awesome is what we're going to be using. And after we do that, we will be all set, and we'll move on to building a mobile-first layout. So this will be the bulk of the video and what I want to mostly concentrate on, and kind of when you leave this video, I want you to be really comfortable with that step number 3. So if you're going to skip anything, do not skip step number 3, where we actually build the layout with CSS Grid. After we're done with that, we're going to actually go through it pretty quickly. So I'm not going to belabor the point. We've already done some examples in prior videos of this full stack roadmap series where we've tediously gone through all the HTML and CSS and gotten into extreme detail. So after we get this layout done, we're going to kind of fly through it using Flexbox and other CSS properties. And finally, we're going to deploy this to GitHub Pages so that you can have a shareable link to post on Twitter, wherever you want to share it with. So that'll be relatively straightforward, and we'll get that done in about 5 minutes. I think that's a long enough intro in my typical fashion. I think we're ready to jump in and start building. To get started, you're going to need two things. First, you're going to have to download Visual Studio Code. It's a code editor, and we used it in prior tutorials, so you might already have it. If not, Google it, go to the download page, grab it for the platform that you need or you're working on. The second thing you'll need is a GitHub account. So you're going to be going to this repository. A repository is just a bunch of code files, and this is my account, and I had set up a starter template for us to work with. I'll leave a link in the description for this repository, and don't worry, I'll show you how to get all of this starter code and starter files into Visual Studio Code without having to get on the command line yet to use the Git utility. So let's go ahead and do that. First, we'll open up Visual Studio Code. So I'm on Windows here, and I'll just search for it. I've already got it downloaded. So let's open that guy up. It's going to open on a different screen for me, but there we go. It's just going to open a random file for you, and what you're going to want to do is create a directory or a folder on your computer that you can put all the files in. An easy way to do that is to just clone the repository. So we'll go back to this GitHub repository that I've left, again, in the description, the link for this. And if you go to the code and you go to HTTPS and click copy on this URL, we can actually drop that into Visual Studio Code. So if you go to the source control utility here within Visual Studio Code, you can click clone repository, and we'll copy in that repository that we just looked at. So we'll press enter. Then it's going to ask us, where do you want to actually save this? For now, I'll go ahead and just save it on my desktop. Fine with me. And what I'll do is create a new folder here, and we'll call it Holy Grail CSS Layout Project. Something like that. Then we'll select that and select that as the repository location. And in the bottom right corner, it says, would you like to open the cloned repository? We'll say open. And now you should have the starter files, and we're working with all the repository. We're all connected up, and we can actually come over to the source control and commit files as we update them to that remote repository that's sitting on GitHub servers. If you want to jump ahead, the Full Stack Roadmap series will eventually cover the Git utility, which is basically just source control. If you want to skip ahead, I'll try to link to a video up here that I walked through the Git basics. And what you would do is open up a terminal within Visual Studio Code, and then you can type in commands like git add all files, git push origin master, and that's going to push those files up, and you got to commit files. All of that stuff is covered in that video. I'm not going to cover it here. For now, we're just going to use the built-in Visual Studio Code source control tool. Feel free to browse through the files. I have a little picture here, a README, and a style guide. That's pretty much it. So there's really no code files. These are just instructions and good reference guides to have open so that we can see some of the colors that we'll be using, right here, and then some of the icons down here. So what we're going to want to do is right-click in the file pane and click New File and type index.html, which is just a standard naming convention for our main HTML document. If you went through a previous challenge within this series, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say Emmet code snippets. And what that is, it's built into Visual Studio Code, and you can actually type out, HTML tags and CSS, things, and click tab, and it's going to expand out that code. So if we were to type HTML and then hit the down arrow to go to HTML5 and press tab, it's going to create an entire boilerplate of HTML for us. So we'll go ahead and change the document to Holy Grail Layout Challenge, and that's going to be the name of the tab that we have. And then anything that we put in the body here. So we can type Hello World and click Save, and now we have a basic HTML document. But the question is, how do we see this in the browser? Well, there's a couple ways to do it, but what we're going to use here is Live Server. This is an extension, so this last little button here in Visual Studio Code. If you go to Live Server, I've already got it downloaded, but it's this top one here, and you follow just the basic instructions for downloading and installing it. Then you should have this little button in the bottom right corner of your screen that says Go Live. And when we click this, it's going to open up our Hello World document right here. And it's serving it on 127.0.0.1, which is equivalent to what we call localhost. We'll get a lot more into this later in the series, the Full Stack Roadmap series. You'll just have to trust me here. So it's localhost. If we pressed refresh, we're going to get the same thing because those are equivalent. And then it's being served on port 5500. It might be different for you, I'm not sure. So we can actually copy this link because we're in Google Chrome right here, and I'd prefer to solve this challenge within Firefox. So all you have to do is copy localhost 5500 and open up Firefox or the browser that we're solving it in. And in a new tab, you paste that in, and we have the same thing, same HTML document, updating live. So if I pull this down and make it a little bit smaller, and then let's open this up, go back to our index.html, and just put in some, random text here and click save, you'll see that it immediately updates here in the browser because it's a live server. So that's the basic setup for live server. I think from here, you're going to have two views. So I actually kind of already set this up. I need to close these tabs. And what you'll do is you'll right click, inspect element, and then go up to this little responsive design mode, click that, and then once you've got that, you'll have this bar at the top that allows you to kind of resize the browser. So you can now close out of these developer tools, and in the bottom right corner of the screen, you can now drag and resize this HTML document to kind of simulate different screen sizes. We will also want to inspect the HTML and CSS, but rather than always right-clicking and inspecting element, I'm going to actually open up two tabs. So just like you can have two tabs of Google open at the same time, you can open localhost 2 times at once. So we'll right-click, inspect element. In this view, we'll just have the sidebar here with our HTML and then CSS down here. So we'll be toggling back and forth between these two, depending on what we need to see. So let me clean this up here. We don't really need this anymore because you've already downloaded it. Don't need this. And we'll use this to kind of reference our design to see what we're building. And once again, this link you can find within the repository files. It's within the README, or you can just copy that link up there in the browser. We've got 2 more extensions that I want to show you. So the first one is going to be the Prettier extension, which is a code formatter. So if you're writing websites in today's age, do not try to format code yourself. This is a much better solution. It's much quicker. And I'll show you exactly what it does here. So right now we have an H2. Let's just make this hello world again. And then if I wanted to tab way over here and make a p tag and put some gibberish in there. But you can see here all the formatting is messed up. So we could come in here and backspace, 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 all of that stuff. But when you're building HTML documents and other documents like JavaScript and CSS, it's kind of tedious to always be backspacing and stuff like that. So we can install this Prettier code formatter. So I just installed it. And now all we have to do, per the instructions, is edit our Visual Studio Code settings. To do that, all you have to do is on Windows, press Control and hit this little caret, or sorry, not the caret, Control P. And I think that on Mac it's going to be Command P. And then from here, you type this little forward caret and type Settings. And from here, you can go to Preferences, Open Settings, JSON. So we'll click that. It will open a new file. And the 2 things that you're going to want to look for are these right here. So it says editor.format on save is going to be true. And then editor default formatter is going to be this little string of characters, which if you looked at the instructions for this extension we just downloaded, that's exactly what it tells you to put in there. So it kind of loads it by default. So let's go back to our index.html, and when we click Control S to save this, you'll see that everything moves around. And this p tag that was, way over here and formatted really weird, rather than backspacing, we just save it and it's going to put it in the correct formatting. This will save you a ton of time. I highly recommend downloading that. And if you need to exclude files, you can also do that. I'm not going to get into that right now, though. I know I said we had 2 more extensions, but I think I misspoke. That was the last one. I think we're ready to get started. So your editor is all set up. Our HTML document is set up. And I'm going to open up this screen to the left so that you can see things live as we're updating them. All right, so what we're looking at on the right is localhost 5500, which, since we started live server down here in the bottom right, is going to represent this index.html document. So when we change stuff here, if we were to delete this line and click save, you'll see that it updates on the right. Let's get our CSS and JavaScript connected up to this HTML document. So the first thing that we need to do is come up into the head of our HTML document and type link. All right, so we'll go down with our arrow keys to the link CSS and click tab. And what it's going to do is expand out a link tag that references style.css. Let's hit save, and you're not going to see any change because that file does not exist yet. Let's create that on the left by right-clicking, new file, style.css. It will open it up in our editor. And now what we can do is we can target everything. That's just a wildcard. and we'll set it to a color of red. So when we click save, you'll see on the right this turns red, which means that we have our HTML and our CSS linked up correctly. The last thing we have to do is link up our JavaScript. So go back to your index.html. JavaScript always goes at the very end of your body. So we'll go under that H2 and type script. And you want to go down to the script :source, click tab, and now we have to link up a JavaScript or script file. So we're going to just call this script.js. We'll click save here on our HTML. Not going to do anything yet. Let's create that file. Right click, new file, script.js. Click enter. And now we just need to write a basic function to test this to make sure it's working. This is what I like to do. Just make a function. And if you're not familiar with how to write JavaScript, you're going to have to go back in the series to the very beginning where I did several videos in a row teaching you JavaScript and the HTML DOM, document object model, and how to use all of this stuff together. So I'm going to make a test function. And in the test function, I'm going to use this alert function, which is actually window is a global object in the browser, window.alert, and we'll say JS is working. We'll click save. Right now, no way to know how to run this function. But if we come back to index.html and come down under the H2, expand out a basic button, we'll say click me. And then within the button, we're going to add an event listener called onClick. And then what we're going to do is assign the test function and invoke that. So this right here is calling this function if our index.html and JavaScript files are connected up correctly. So we'll click save on that. This button will pop up, and when we click it, you'll see a dialog pop up that says the JS is working just as we wrote within this function. So that tells us that since we have red text and the button works, that means our CSS, JavaScript, and HTML are all working together and we're ready to start the project. Just kidding. Forgot to do one last thing in our setup, and that is add our fonts, our Google Fonts, and our icons. This will be relatively simple. And let's open up Firefox to see what we're dealing with. So we're going to be using Font Awesome, which is this icon library, and you can browse all the icons here. There's tons of them. This is a very popular library. And then we will be using Google Fonts, which is going to be kind of the easiest thing to incorporate into our project. So how do we know which ones to grab? Well, if we go to our style guide, open that up, and go down to the fonts and icons section, you'll see that the font that we want is called Dosis or Dosis, and we want all of the following icons. We'll grab these a little bit later. We just need to get it set up in the first place. So if we open up our browser, search for Dosis or Dosis, however you say that, we'll click on that font, and then you get all these different weights. We're going to always grab regular, that's pretty standard, and then we'll also grab bold for 700. All you need to do is grab this link over here, these multiple links, Control C on that, go back to our files here, and in our index.html document, this will also go at the top. So we'll put it right above our style.css, and we'll say link, go down to C, or actually we don't need to do this, we have it copied. So paste that in, click save, and you'll see that these two links have been added right above our style.css. Adding the icons is going to be a very similar process. You'll just go back to Font Awesome, and you can click start, and they'll ask you for your email. I find that a little tedious, so I just go over here and type in Font Awesome CDN, or Content Delivery Network, and you go to cdnjs.com. This first one right here, which is hosted on Cloudflare, you can just copy the link tag. So we just copied that, and we go back and right under our Google Fonts, we can click down and paste that link in. Click Save, and Prettier is going to kind of format that for us. And we just added this link right here. To make sure that these are working correctly, we can test that out real quick. So let's put our live version of the document. I'll close, actually I'll keep the fonts open for a second. All right, here's what we're looking for. Right now we have some red text and a button. And what you'll see is when we enable the fonts, this Hello World text is going to look a little bit different. To do that, let's go to the Google Fonts, and right below it says the CSS rules to specify the families. Let's just copy that, go to styles or style.css, and then we're going to set this on the HTML tag, copy that in, click Save, and now when you come back, our fonts are going to look a little different. So again, I'll comment that out, click Save. This is the default. Comment it back in, click Save, and now it has changed. So our fonts are all hooked up. Last thing is to check the icons. So if we come right below the button, this is where we're going to add an icon. And in order to do that, let's go to Font Awesome, and we'll go to Icons, and we'll just pick a random one. Maybe this acorn right here, which happens to be a pro version icon, which we can't use. So let me go to something simpler. We're going to be using the home icon in our project, so we might as well look at that. And you can see at the top, it gives you the HTML that we need. So we can copy this HTML, or I can just show you how to construct it on your own. So we'll use the I tag, click Tab, and then to enable the Font Awesome, we just need to give it a couple classes. So the FAS and FA-home are the two classes that we need. And just like this style sheet over here that we are creating ourselves, the Font Awesome library that we just imported up here in this link is a very similar concept. So if we write a class in our style.css, we can obviously use that in our index.html. And in this case, we just imported Font Awesome, and it comes with predefined classes. So we can type in FAS, give it a space because we're going to add another class, FA-home, and let's go back to our document and we'll click Save. And now you can see this little home icon, which is going to be red, is going in there nicely. So we know that everything is connected up. We've got our CSS, our JavaScript, and both of our external libraries, the fonts and the icons. At this point, we can get rid of this ugly red color in our style.css. So that's going to look a little nicer. And then, of course, we can get rid of all of this stuff in here, except for that script at the bottom. Now we have a blank canvas to start working on. I know I said that all of this is going to be in one single video, but I changed my mind. We're going to end this video right here, and the next video is going to be setting up the layout for our project. I'll see you in the next video.